and welcome back to the Science Discovery Show. This week we have a very important guest here to join us and talk to us about Shoal Lake 40 First Nations water crisis. Please welcome scientist Dr. Richards. Welcome, Dr. Richards. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
I have many questions to ask you today about the water crisis in Shoal Lake, so let's get started. My first question for you is, how did you first get involved in the Shoal Lake 40 water crisis?
Well, the Shoal Lake water crisis is one of the many water crises in the First Nations reserves in Canada, which most people in Canada would think that everyone has clean drinking water in this day and age. But those crises are not shown in the news, so I wanted to help. So I started to do some research on the contamination of the lake.
But where is exactly Shoal Lake 40 First Nations Reserve located?
Well, it is situated right on the edge of Manitoba and Ontario's border, which is very close to the city of Winnipeg and has roughly around 292 First Nations living on the reserve with no clean drinking water.
So why do they have unsafe drinking water?
Well, Winnipeg and Shoal Lake were divided into two construction zones of a canal. As a result, this caused all clean water was diverted from Shoal Lake, leaving them with contaminated water, and Winnipeg with clean water.
So when I get water out of my tap, I turn it on and it's clean and I'm able to drink it. So what do the First Nations have to do to their water that comes out of the taps?
Well, the government has issued a water boil advisory for over 2 decades, so they would either have to boil their water or use bottled water. As I said before, water that comes from the lake is brought to a treatment center in Winnipeg for the residents of the city of Winnipeg and have clean and fresh drinking water. When only 155 kilometers away, the First Nations have to boil their water.
What would happen if they drank the contaminated water, and what exactly is contaminating it?
Well, this is a complicated answer. First of all, if they were to drink the water out of the taps, which indeed comes from the lake, that would lead to some serious health issues such as the digestive tract illness. For example, diarrhea, vomiting, and flu-like illnesses. But you may be wondering, why is this happening? Well, we have done some water quality tests which have shown that Cryptosporidium parasites, Giardia parasites, coliform bacteria, and toxins are present in the water. A friend of mine from the University of Winnipeg, Eva Pipp, has studied the water quality of Shoal Lake since around in the 1980s, and she said that she has seen a drastic change in the water quality. The main chemical components in the water are blue-green algae, which is a cyan toxin, which falls into the 3 broad groups of the chemical structure of cyclic peptides, alkaloids, and polysaccharide chemicals.
Interesting. But who created this problem?
The Ontario, the Manitoba, the federal government, and international commissions are responsible for the Shoal Lake water quality.
You said before they either have to boil their water or get bottled water. Is it hard for them to get bottled water? Because I have heard before that it's sometimes difficult to supply people with bottled water.
They try and supply people with bottled water during the winter times, but it's very hard because the roads are so icy and dangerous. Plus, there is an unreliable ferry that brings them bottled water during the summer, but the chief of the reserve has been trying to get the government to construct a connecting road to access the Trans-Canada Highway, so these roads are more accessible.
How did I never know about this issue before you told me?
Well, the community has tried to advocate for years for change in their water supply and because they're cut off from their basic needs and emergency services. But this crisis is also shown in the Canadian human rights violated in the Indigenous First Nations water supply, and the First Nations water crisis are not shown in the daily news, which in fact should be one of the top priorities because it is a basic human right.
Has there been any changes in the past few years upon this water crisis, or is it still the same?
They announced that the chief of the reserve signed a contract for the construction of a water treatment and a distributed system, which supplies the residents with clean and fresh drinking water. The Indigenous Service Canada is contributing $33 million for the project of a new water treatment that should be roughly done by around December 2020. Also, they have added a new road that provides residents with a year-round access to the Trans-Canada Highway, which is called the Freedom Road.
As you said earlier, there are many water crises in Canada, but speaking worldwide, do you know if the United Nations is doing any part in these water crises?
Off the top of my head, I remember that by the year 2030, the United Nations would like the universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. The Canadian government is trying to achieve clean drinking water by the year 2021, but Shoal Lake has already achieved this goal.
Well, those are all the questions that I have for you today, and I want to thank you very much for coming on my show. I have learned a lot more about the water crisis, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the audience has learned a lot more too.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's go to commercial.
Temptations, all you need is one shake.